Okay, so what we want to do is export the game so that we can put it online and other people can download it and play it. There's a lot of different ways to do this. We're just going to go over a couple basic ones. And for now, we're just going to export one level. So even though this is like level 3 in my project, I don't have any way to connect the levels right now. That's something that we will go over after the midterm. So eventually we will be able to go between levels. But for now, we basically just have one level. And we're just going to start with testing that. And so when I export, I need to make sure that I have the right level. And normally when I've been demoing and running the game, I've been using the scene preview button here instead of like the build button, which is this one, or run project button. And if you run this one, you'll see that you have to select a current scene. And so that's one way to say, like, this is the current scene that I want to... Oh, I'm going to turn off the volume. So that's one way of saying what you want the current scene to be. But if you've already set the current scene to something else, the way that you can reset it is go to Project Settings, and in the Run section under Application, you can set the level that you want to be the main scene. And this is what will open when your user launches the application. So normally this would be like a start screen or maybe even like a cinematic or something like that. But for our midterm, this is just going to be whatever level you've created so far. So if your main scene was not the level that you want it to be, or if there was nothing set here, you would just click on the folder here and find the scene that you want to use, and then choose that and click open. And that's pretty much all you have to do to select that. There's a couple other settings that you may want to look at before you export your project. And under display, under window, you'll find a couple settings. So you can change the size here. I've kind of kept mine at this default size. If you want a different size, of course, you can change it there. And then you can also change the mode between windowed, full screen, etc. You might want full screen if you've got larger graphics. I have smaller graphics, so I'm going to stick with windowed. It's kind of up to you there. The one disadvantage with full screen is if you don't have a way for the user to get out of full screen, you can quit the program using just the regular computer controls. But if your user is not like super computer savvy, they may not know how to do that, and so they may have a hard time getting out of the full screen mode. So for us, I don't think it makes a big difference, but eventually if you want to go with the full screen mode, you should have an option for getting out of it, which you can do with a key press or a menu, stuff that we'll go over later. There's also a resizable option here, and I have this set to off. So the default is to have it on, which means the user can resize the window. I have it set to off because when you're designing the game, unless you're testing it at different sizes, your design may not look good, or it may not work the same way if the user resizes the window. So an easy way when you're focusing on other things to fix that is just to turn that option off. So you don't have to do that, but that's another option that you might want to do. There's also this DPI down here, and you can see I've turned that off as well. The default for that is on, and basically what that means is if you have a high density screen, it's going to resize the window according to that. And so if you guys are using like the Retina Max that we have in the classroom, your game window is probably really, really tiny because it's not using the like 2:1 or 3:1 ratio. It's just showing the actual per pixel ratio. So I would probably recommend turning that off so that the window looks the way it does on your computer, unless you're using high density graphics, in which case you can leave it on. Again, it's kind of up to you how you want to deal with that, but for simplicity's sake, turning this off is probably a good idea. So those are the main settings that we want to look at. There's a bunch of other settings here, but I'm not going to worry about those for now. If you have questions about specific settings, of course, we can go over them. But I'm going to leave that as is. You can also change the icon. There's like an icon file here. If you have an icon that you want to use for the game, you can just use the graphic and just either rename it icon.svg and put it where this icon is, or you can select the icon. So if I go to, again, project settings, I forget where this is, but if I type in icon, it should, it's probably in here somewhere. I forget where it is, but if you want to replace the icon, you can. It's not a requirement, so I'm not going to worry about it for now, but we could go over that if it's something you want to do. Anyway, once you've got everything set up the way you want to, we're going to export. So for this, we go to project and then go to export. And if you haven't set anything up, you're not going to see anything here. So we have to add different options for the export. And you can see the options are for different platforms. So the defaults are Android, iOS, Linux, Mac, UWP, Web, and Windows. Most of us are using Mac, some of us are using Windows, so it would be good for us to do both. So I'll put a Mac one there. And if this is the first time you're doing it, you're gonna see this error. So if you haven't downloaded these templates, it's gonna give you this error. And so what we can do is go to manage export templates. If you don't get that error, or there's some issue or whatever, you close that window by mistake or something, you can easily go here, get that back, go to project tools, or no, it's not under tools. Where is it? Let's see, manage export templates. Okay, it's under editor now. Okay, so let's go to editor, manage export templates. And then we can just, click download and install. This takes 2 seconds, or maybe a little longer than 2 seconds. But once this is done, we'll be able to use the different templates. And so basically, we're just going to make a build for Mac and Windows. You can do a build for either platform, regardless of what computer you're on. The one downside, of course, is if you make a Windows build, you can't open it on a Mac and test it. So I'd recommend, if you have time and you have a PC, testing it, and vice versa. If you make a Mac build, you definitely want to test whatever build is native to your platform, because you may find that it doesn't work for various reasons, and you don't want to upload something that doesn't work. That happens a lot of times, so I'm probably going to mention it a couple times. Test your build before you put it online, because it may not work. It probably will work, but it may not work, and if you don't test it, you won't know that. Okay, so now let's go back to project export, and now we can add a Mac build. Oh, whoops, I already added a Mac build. Okay, so let's go to our Mac build, and runnable is what we want, and then we can set where we want it to go. And so you can, normally I would put this not inside my main game folder. Basically, I don't want the builds that I create to be incorporated into the rest of the project. So normally I'll go up one directory. So this is where I have like all of my main folders, like my original images, recordings and screenshots, and my game folder. And I'll create a folder here called builds. And I'll click save here. Oh, and I have to give it a name. So I'll say Mac build 1. And there's some options here. Most of the options we can ignore. The icon is here now. So if you want an icon, you could put the icon here. Maybe we can actually just use one of our sprites. Although we're not going to be able to cut up the sprites. So we'd have to, so it's going to look kind of weird, but maybe I'll just use that one just for fun. If you're gonna try to publish your game on the Mac store, you'd have to do a bundle identifier. We don't really have to worry about that. Versions are good for if you're working with a team and you need to keep track of different versions. You can put that here, but we really don't need to worry about that. There's a bunch of other options, but we pretty much don't really need to worry about any of them. One thing that you might want to do is if you make an export and the exported file is really, really large, like over 100 megabytes, and you need to get it smaller, you might want to check in this export mode and do something like selected scenes or select specific resources. So I'm just going to export everything, but you can actually choose which parts of the game to export. So if your game is too large, that's a way that you can kind of save some size. Okay. Oh, it's giving me another warning. Target platform requires texture enable. Okay, so it says I have to enable import S3TC. Okay, let's try to do that. I guess this is a new Godot 4 thing. Let's see if we can do that. I'm just going to take a screenshot of this real quick so I can remember what it says. Okay, let's go to project settings. Import. Textures. Okay. Turn that on. Click save and restart. Okay, hopefully this is fixed now. Invalid bundle identifier. Okay, so it looks like it's actually making us... Okay, so we do have to make our own bundle identifier. I'm just going to make something up. I'm going to say com.mmp270.example project. Oh, it doesn't let me have an underscore. Okay, example project. Okay. Eventually, now I just have yellow warnings, so I'm just going to ignore those, but these would be important if I was trying to publish something on Apple or something like that. Anyway, now that I'm good, I'm going to go to export project. It's going to make this thing called a DMG file, and I want to turn debug off. If you're debugging, of course you can turn debug on, but I'm going to turn it off and click save. And so that doesn't take too long because my game is not very complicated. If you have a more complex game, it's going to take longer. But what we'll see is in our builds folder, here's our DMG file. And so this is like the default build file for a Mac. And so if I open this, I should be able to run the game. So there's my game. There's my cool icon that I added. And if I run this, hopefully it'll work. Okay, it looks like it's running so far. Oh, I forgot to reset my player to the beginning of the level. That's another thing to be careful about. Is I had moved my player for some testing stuff. Uh-oh. Okay. I had moved my player for some testing stuff, and I forgot to reset the player. So I would just go back to the level, find the player, and then my player is supposed to start at 0, 0, so I just reset that. And then I'd re-export it, and you know, I can just go to project, export, and export project, and you know, I could say Mac build 2, or I could just save and overwrite Mac build 1, and now I've got a new DMG. Okay, so we've got one build. I'm just gonna make a Windows build real quick, and then we'll be done. So notice when I load the DMG, it actually adds like a disk image over here. And so when I'm playing it right now, I'm not actually playing it off the computer, I'm playing it off this disk image. So, you know, normally I would want to put this in my applications folder or whatever. Okay, so we tested it and it works. Let's make a Windows build. So I'm going to add Windows and choose the export path again. I'm going to go back and go to builds and name this my game. And there's a bunch of settings here. I don't really think we have to deal with any of them. There's one thing that says I have to do this special thing if I want to change the icon. I don't really care about that. This is kind of an annoying thing, but there's instructions on the Godot website for how to do it correctly to get a custom icon. But I don't really care, so I'm gonna skip that. I'm gonna go to export project. And the Windows version of this is a little bit different. And so when we look at the Windows build, it has two files. The exe is the executable file. That's what you can run on Windows. But then the PCK or pack file is all your game data. And you really need these files to be in the same place when you're on Windows, if you delete or move this pack file and try to run the exe file, it's not going to work correctly. So the best way to distribute a Windows build is to grab these two files. If you're on Mac, you can right click and say compress, and that'll make a zip. And so now the two files are together, and you can call this my game Windows or whatever. And that you can upload by itself to itch.io. So that way you don't have to worry about uploading both of these files at the same time. So it's a little bit easier with the Mac than the Windows, but as long as you're aware of that you should be fine. And then we can just look at the file size. So this DMG is 60 megabytes. That's not too bad. The Windows zip is 30 megabytes, which is a little bit better because it's compressed. And there we go. That's pretty much the whole process. You could also zip the DMG. You could compress it a little bit and see if that saves us. It saves us like 2 megabytes. Not really worth it, but that's okay. If you're on Windows, when you go to zip the Windows files, it's usually, I think, under the share menu, so it doesn't show up as its own menu. Like when you select these files and right click, on Mac, compresses right there. On Windows, I think it's either like share or something like that, and then there's like an option to create an archive. So if you need help with that, I can go over it, but it should be pretty straightforward. Okay, so that's it for this video. So we've exported a couple files. We're just going to do Mac and Windows just to keep it kind of simple, but there are other platforms, like you can make a web build so people can play it on the web. That might be worthwhile if you want to be able to distribute it more easily. That one's a little bit harder, but I can go over that at some point if you guys want to. But yeah, that's it for now. Next time, we'll go over how to upload those on the itch.io website.